Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're starting the portion of Lech Lecha. The beginning, the start of the Torah, Vayomer Hashem el Avraham. God said to Avraham, Lech Lecha me'artzecha, go out from your land, your birthplace, umi beit avicha, your house, your home, and to the land that I will show you, and the reward, I will make you into a great nation. This is the first verse. Ve'escha legoy gadol. I'll make you a great nation. Va'avarechecha. I'll bless you. Ve'heyei bracha. And you will be able to bless others. You'll be a source of blessing to others. Ramban Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, is asking a simple question right off the bat. He's asking, why doesn't the Torah tells us that Avraham was a righteous man? Why doesn't the Torah tells us that Avraham was special? Says Nachmanides, everywhere else you find that the Torah explained with an introduction. For example, Noach, when we learn about Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya bedorotav. Noach was a righteous man, perfect before God in his generation. And then the Torah, God comes to Noah and is asking him to build an ark because he's going to be saved. Yitzchak, David, King David, God says to him, if you walk before me in perfectly, I will reward you. King Solomon, God says to him, if you'll be perfect, I will reward you. Says Nachmanides, I don't understand. The Torah tells, if you follow my law, I will give you rain in time. In other words, there is an act and a consequence. Here, Avraham, there is no prior introduction, especially that we know that Avraham, in his youth, before he's 75, this is when he's 75 years old, as the Torah tells us, Avraham already been to Ur Kasdim, he already been thrown into the furnace, and God saved him. He already defiled or went against his father, who was an idol worshiper and was a merchant of idols, so he was deep into idols. And Avraham separated not only from his community, but from his own family as well. And the Torah does not say anything. The Torah, in fact, is counting him as one of the family. It says Terach took his family, Haran, Nachor, and their wives, and Avraham. Avraham is part of the family. Now God comes to Avraham and says, go away, and I'll reward you. Why there is no introduction? Ali, did you understand the question?
The first two tests, they don't have in Torah directly.
It's not about the first two tests. That's a different story. It's just simply the Torah tells Abraham to go and be blessed. Nachmanides says, why the Torah does not tell us that Abraham was a righteous man? Why don't the Torah introduces Abraham as a holy man that was connected to God first? Right. And that's the first question. The second question, the reward is far greater than the effort. Live in your homeland, deserve reward, but the kind of reward, I'll make you a great nation, I'll bless you, you'll be a source of blessing for what? Live in your home, get on the plane and fly to another country. That's it. Albeit you're 75 years old. Don't forget Lot. His nephew was there with him too. We don't find that Lot is getting rewarded at all. Why? So these are the two questions. Yes, Harry?
Yaakov and Yitzchak also. You don't see any introduction to them.
Sure.
Where does it say, Yitzchak, I'll do something for you?
Huh?
Where does it say that God says to Yitzchak, be whatever it is, I'll do something for you?
Yitzchak Amar, Nachmanides, I'm reading you what Nachmanides says. Also, our patriarch Yitzchak was promised divine favor for the sake of Avraham, my servant.
Right.
In other words, God explained why. He gives you an introduction. That's why I don't want to bring in tests here.
Okay.
Again, the question is very simple. When you read about Noah's relationship with God, or Noah's reward, or Noah's saving, it's because the Torah first introduces Noah's good deeds, that he was a righteous man, a holy man.
Okay.
When Yitzchak is connected to God with reward, it's because of the sake of his father. The Torah says, "In bechukotai telechu," if you follow my path, I'll give you rain. King David, God says, "If you walk in my path, I'll reward you." King Solomon, the same thing. How come by Avraham, the introduction to Avraham is God says to him, "Go away from your land, and I'll reward you." Nothing about who the man is, character. The second question the Nachmanides is asking, which we'll deal much later, is the reward is far greater, seemingly far greater than the effort. Right. Says the Rebbe, the answer that Nachmanides gives is very simple. Nachmanides says that in order for Abraham to become great servant of God, he had to fight a very low defiled life people. Ur-Kasdim was loaded with very low life people, and the Torah does not want to mention them. And therefore the Torah was forced to remove and to erase any trace of his past. Because when you mention that Abraham was righteous because he was thrown into a fire furnace, or because he separated himself from Ur-Kasdim, from those people, you're going to mention the wicked people, and you don't want to do that. Did you understand that? The Rebbe is asking a simple. That's Nachmanides' answer. Again, Nachmanides' answer is, if you were to introduce Abraham's greatness and connection to God by his deed in the past, before this, you are forced to mention also the wicked people that caused them the challenges. And the Torah does not want to mention wicked people's names and deeds. Says the Rebbe, I don't understand. You can still do it without mentioning the name. I'm sure everybody has that question on mind. Just like by Noah, you can say Avraham stood and supported God despite all the challenges. You don't have to mention even the town. Just like by Noah. Does it say where he lived? Do I know if he lived in Algeria or Nigeria? I don't know where he lived. Noah was a righteous man in his generation, meaning he was unique. You can mention Abraham walked before God. Abraham was a righteous man because he never let go of God's commandments. You don't have to. That's the Rebbe's question.
Okay.
Ali, you understand the question? Says, what?
You got to me early. Usually it takes a good 15 minutes.
Says the Rebbe, here is the answer. Avraham Avinu, our forefather Avraham, is the first Jew. He is the father of all Jewish men. Noah is the father of all humanity. Everybody came from Noah, including Jewish people, but he's not considered my father. Avraham is considered my father, even though Avraham fathered the Muslims too. Avraham fathered a very large portion of the universe, but he is the father of the Jewish people in uniquely. And the reason is, God is starting a relationship with him that will be passed to one of his kids and will be passed to one of the kids and then go on to all the families. In other words, there is a unique relationship between Abraham and his descendants that started from Abraham. What is so unique about the relationship with God? It's unlike any other nations and any other righteous man's relationship. The relationship stems from God, not from the human. Noah, let's contrast it with Noah. Noah turned to God. Noah obeyed God. Noah served God. And therefore God rewarded him. God had a relationship with him. Avraham was chosen by God, not because of his past deeds, but God had chosen him for whatever reason, and therefore God is the one who initiated the relationship. Did you understand that?
But actually, when you think about it, Noah was the forefather of Avraham. So not only was he the father of all the Jews, he was father of all the whole country.
So that unique relationship continued on to only one son.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not, I'm going to say it in layman's terminology. In Noah, it's two people to tango. You need Noah and you need God. They have a relationship. Each one is doing their part.
Mm.
Noah is serving God. Noah don't disobey God, and God in return is going to save them, reward them, etc. By Abraham, it's not two to tango. It's only one. Who is that? God. God chose Abraham. Why did he choose Abraham? I don't know. And therefore, the Torah does not mention his past, because it's nothing to do with his past. That's why Abraham's children were not all chosen, only Yitzchak. God says, because of your father, I'm going to reward you the same type of relationship. That's unique to Abraham. Says the Rebbe, that's why, in other words, this is the language of the Rebbe, in all other nations, when they become righteous, they serve God, they obey God with 7 laws of Noah, they are connecting to God. They are connected to God, and therefore God is happy with them and rewards them. A Jew by birth has a neshama, a godly spark. A Jew is completely nullified before God. In other words, you don't need to come closer to God. You don't need to marry into God. You are God. You represent God in the universe. And that cannot be achieved by a human. It's only through God. And therefore, Abraham is the one chosen by God, not because of any special conduct. God chose him. Once God chose him and chose to give it to one of his sons, to Yitzchak, and Yitzchak to one of his sons, he had two, Yaakov, and then Yaakov doing Matan Torah, everyone, all the families too. But this is a unique relation. It's not a two-way. It's a one-way from God down. Therefore, says the Rebbe, that's why you see the difference between the commandments given to the rest of the nations and the Jewish people. The 7 Noahides law, the 7 laws of Noah, are there to keep the universe at peace. It's to be kind to one another, to have a judgment, to have judges, not to steal, to have families. It's all about keeping the universe at peace. The Jewish person's commandments, not only they are in quantity, but they are totally on a whole different level. It's not about preservation of the universe. It's about bringing God to the universe. And therefore, it doesn't make sense. 7 laws of Noah, when you dissect them, when you study them, they make sense. They keep the universe very well. God's commandments have nothing to do with common sense. It's about bringing God to the universe. In other words, you need to get used to the idea that being Jewish is not a two-way relationship between me and God, but it's a one-way relationship. God chose us, God is blessing us, God will preserve us, God will keep us around. God said that if you obey me, I'll be more, I'll bring you abundant of blessings. I'll give you more. But that's not what the relationship is based on. It's just God is building it into relationship, but it's his relationship. Ali, did you understand?
Yes.
That's why every day when we thank God, we say, Uvanu bacharta mikol ha'amim. Thank you, God, for choosing us from all the nation. Not that we both chose each other. In a marriage, the husband chooses the wife. You know that, right? The husband marries the wife. I'm about to marry a couple. I'm involved with few weddings now, Baruch Hashem, and bar mitzvahs. I'm married in December 28th. And they asked me about exchange of rings. The husband wants to give a wife, and the wife wants it. I says, not under the chuppah, because Uvanu Bacharta, God, represented by the male, is the one who chose the wife. The wife does not choose. The wife accepts the marriage. She has to agree to it, but she has to accept. Just on Mount Sinai, we accepted God, but it's a one-way relationship. Not exchange of rings. There are no two parties here. When it comes to the other nations, it's a two-way street. You choose God, God chooses you. He will bless you, he will give you the means, he will reward you. By us, God chose us, and therefore God says, as a chosen people, you have to spread God. So we become an extension of God.
Emissary.
And that's emissaries. And that's why we say, Ubanu Bacharta. Every time we talk about God, the relationship or the uniqueness of the Jew, we talk about not we chose God or we told God that we agree, but rather it's up to downwards towards the Jew.
They held him out over our head.
Yeah.
Truth is, God offered it to all the nations first, and all refused it, and then we accepted.
Uh-huh.
God offered the Torah to all the nations, and they refused it.
But this is after he chose Avraham.
Huh.
After he already chose Avraham. That's why he put the mountain. It's a side question that I don't want to take time to address.
13.
What the rabbi is saying is that that's the uniqueness of Avraham. Now we understand why you don't learn about the uniqueness of Avraham like about Noah. Simply because it has nothing to do with God telling Avraham, Lech Lecha, and I'll bless you. In other words, I chose you. Because it's not because of the way he conducted himself. It's God who chose him to be the first Jew. And therefore, what he did or didn't do you don't bring it into the table. It has nothing to do. Therefore, Noah, it's a relationship. You need to know why God chose Noah. Avraham, you don't need to know because it's nothing to do with Abraham's conduct. It's just that God chose him to be the representative of God. And now we can address another question.
What about the 10 tests? I mean, what about the Akedah? That's after the
So
Akedah?
this is a way for God to prove to the angels that he is worthy. But they are not dependent on the God's chosen of Avraham is not dependent on those tests. That's why God says, please do it. So they should not have any opening, any complaint that why is he so special? But it's not the reason for the relationship. In other words, if I have a father, my relationship with my father is not because he's kind to me or he's giving me money. It's because he's my father. I am God as my father's extension. Jew is the extension of God. And therefore it's not dependent on any of my conduct prior to God choosing us. Do you understand that? Yes, Harry.
Abraham's actions before God said him this, he's the one who believed in monotheism. He only worshiped God.
It's all good and fine.
Right.
But the first time God have a relationship in the Torah is God speaking to Abraham and commanding him to leave your homeland.
But before this,
but it's not in the Torah.
Right. Okay.
Why?
Why?
Because the uniqueness of Abraham is not about the behavior that was prior to that.
Okay.
And as I explained earlier, it is just an answer to the angels who complain, why did you choose Abraham? I just wanted, before we address the second question, the Rebbe says that this is very important for every Jew. Why? The first, whenever you reach out to a Jew and you want him to connect to God, it makes sense to explain them in common sense why we do the mitzvah, why we keep Shabbat, why we put on tefillin, why we light Shabbat candles, why we eat kosher. Says the Rebbe, it has nothing to do with common sense. Of course, there's a mitzvah to study Torah. Lech Lecha. What is the first commandment for God, for Avraham, the first Jew? Walk. Walk. In other words, action. Tell someone, light a Hanukkah candle. Tell someone, put on tefillin. You agree, you disagree. It has nothing to do with your common sense. It has to do with action. That's how I spread God. That's how I represent God in the universe. Look at Abraham's first relationship with God, mentioned in the Torah. He had a great relationship prior. Some say from the age of 3, some say from the age of 40. It doesn't matter, 28. But it has nothing to do with the Torah. In the Torah, which the Torah means a lesson for me, nothing prior is mentioned. You know why? Because it has nothing to do with me. What's to do with me? God tells Avraham, Lech Lecha, take a walk. Walk, do action. So if I meet a Jew and I find him that he's Jewish, I say to him, did you do a mitzvah today? Let's pray. Let's study Torah as a commandment. And only then you can understand. Of course, God says, use your brains to serve God. But that's secondary. That's number one. God, the Rebbe says the same thing. Within my life, I need to understand that the mitzvot don't always make sense. but we will follow God because they have to do it, action. That's why before we do a mitzvah, we say the bracha, we say Asher Kideshanu b'mitzvotav, that He sanctified us. Kideshanu in Hebrew means He sanctified me, not we sanctify between us. It's not like a marriage between two parties that they both partners that come together. They do a joint venture. It's not a joint venture. God chose to sanctify me. You know how? By washing hands before the bread, by saying a prayer, by studying Torah. It's all about the action. Did you understand that?
Mhm.
Says the Rebbe, now we can understand the Ramban is hinting to a second question. Second question is, how come the reward is so great? It's immeasurable to the commandment. God says to him, leave your homeland, leave your city, leave your home, leave your family, and move away. And what's the reward? I'll make you great. I'll make you blessed, and I'll make you bless every other nation around you. Everybody blessed. The reward is Noah. What's his reward for standing against his generation? He's saved. He's spared. Avraham, the reward for what? Taking a walk. Now, the commentators, by the way, ask even farther. He already put his life under fire. He jumped to the fire. Do you see any reward for that? No reward. Because he lived. God cooled down. God cooled down the furnace, right?
He was in jail for 10 years.
And he was in jail. He ran away from him. It doesn't matter. We don't see any great reward. Now, if I told you, jump to the fire furnace or leave your country to Russia, to Iran, you jump to go away, not to jump to the furnace. Yet the reward is so great. Says the Rebbe, that explains, because what does the commandment mean? God says to him, Lech Lecha, go away, מארצך, ממולדתך ומבית אביך. Kabbalistic Hasidic interpretation is from your desires, from your habits, because your country is about your desires, lifestyle. Home represent my desires, my hobbies, my desires. In other words, all that I was raised, I love this ice cream, I love to stay out late, I like to stay in bed longer. These are different habits and desires we all possess. God says to him, Kabbalistic, go away from it to what? El haaretz, to the land that I will show you. Why does land called Aretz? Aretz is the same root as ratzon, desire. It's called Aretz because she wanted to serve God. That's what sheratzta la'asot retzon kona. She wanted to fulfill God's desire. In other words, it says to him, leave all your habits, leave all your desires, and do as I told you. Action. Therefore, says the Rebbe, once you express God in your life, you are God. And therefore, all the reward, endless reward, immeasurable compared to the action. So by Noah and by running away from the furnace, the reward is measured based on the action, based on the efforts, based on the investment. But when God gives to Abraham the first time, God commanding him, nothing else before, nothing mentioned before, even though the war, is because God says to him, go away from your habits, go away from your desires, let go, we call it bitul. Let go of your selfish ego and become a vehicle, a container that contains me. That's what El Haaretz, to the land that I'll show you, meaning to representing God fully. And therefore, God says to him, the blessing is endless. The blessing that will be expressing out of you, internally, externally, all the nations around you will be blessed. You will be blessed. You will become great, because all that, it's not a reward for the effort, because the effort is far less than the reward. It's a direct expression of what he became. Once he became a container for God, God is expressed to him, and God is immeasurable, is endless. And that's why the reward is so great. So again, the Rebbe's explanation Ramban asked, how come we don't read about, or don't, in the Torah about greatness of Avraham as an introduction? The Rebbe says, because the idea of a relationship between a Jew and God is unique to everything else, and that is where God comes and chooses a person, and God expresses himself through the Jew. That's why Avraham is the reward is so far much greater than the efforts. Has nothing to do with the efforts. Once he becomes a container to contain God, God is expressed, and therefore everything that's as a direct outcome. And that is the reason we need to learn about it, because Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, whatever that happened to our forefathers is an expression that for us. And therefore we need to know that the start of our relationship is Uvanu Bacharta. God chose us, and therefore our goal is to do action, Lech Lecha. And in addition, then God is expressed through us, and we have nothing to fear but be rewarded immeasured compared to the efforts. So I put so much effort, and my reward is way, way more.
Sure.
And that's the end of the lesson from
Until-
this week.
until
Thank you very much.